When we live by our highest values, we have the greatest, most objective state of awareness available. I like to think of myself as a man on a mission. So I help people identify what their values are, because most people are telling you how you ought to be instead of how you are.
Talking about our values is something that we do a lot on Inside the Inspired. And today we are going to meet the number one human behavior specialist when it comes to talking about this topic, helping you identify your values, what you stand for, how you make decisions, why you believe the things that you believe. And there's no one more equipped to arm us with the knowledge necessary to help us discover our values in this individual right here, the author of over 40 books, who has overcome quite an incredible struggle himself. I'm so humbled to be here with the Dr. John Demartini. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on your show.
It's honestly a pleasure. I've done the deep dive, and as someone who grew up in the streets, someone who struggled with learning disabilities, and you've just been through it all, I feel like. How does it feel to kind of achieve this, or not kind of, to actually achieve this level of proficiency and skill and impact that you have after all these years of commitment to doing so much good?
I like to think of myself as a man on a mission. That's it. And I don't. I smell the roses, but I don't identify myself as with the term success or failure. I just love the idea of getting to do what I love doing, which is teach, research, write, and travel. And so I just keep doing it. I don't have anything else I'd rather be doing, so I just love doing it.
When I listen to you talk about values, and I've learned so much from the interviews, from the books, and one of the craziest things is that for me, when my eyes were kind of open to the impact of understanding your values, really developing that role of self-awareness, things fell into place for me. What is it about understanding your values and self-awareness? Why do they go so hand in hand?
46 years ago, I was entering professional school. And I asked myself, why do some people walk their talk and some people limp their life? Why do some people do what they say they're going to do, and why do some people don't? And I was curious because I had, since I was 18, wanted to master my own life and assist other people in mastering theirs. And that required a congruency between the statement and the intention in your life. And I found that the driving force was the hierarchy of values that people held. Now, most people, if you ask them what their values are, they'll tell you social idealisms. They'll say, integrity and truth and honesty and, save the planet and this kind of stuff. But I'm not interested in what people say. I'm interested in what they're actually demonstrating in their life. Your life demonstrates what you value. Many people, I was speaking in South Africa in 2012. There's about 5,000 people there. And I asked people, how many of you want to be financially independent? And everybody put their hand up. Some people put two hands up. Some people put their leg in the air. And I said, I looked across the room and it was 99.99999% everybody had their hand up. I said, how many of you are financially independent, where your passive income exceeds your active income and you work because you love to, not because you have to? And all the hands went down but 7. And I said, isn't it interesting that you all claim that you want to be financially independent, but only less than 1% of you actually obtained it? And this is in a unique group of entrepreneurs striving for fulfillment, achievement. So this is probably more than the average. And look at the ratio. And I said, what you say and what you do are not always the same. And we sometimes inculcate and inject the values of outer authorities that we admire into our life and inject these moral hypocrisies and idealisms from these ideologues, and then attempt to live in this idealized world instead of actually looking at what our body and life actually demonstrate is important to us. And if you do not have a value on wealth building and buying assets that appreciate in value more than the immediate gratifying consumables that depreciate in value, then you're not likely to obtain this outcome. And so I helped them realize that their values were dictating their financial destiny. Instead of asking people what their values are, I tried to find a more objective way of determining and deciphering what was really their life was demonstrating, what was really important to them. And I came up with some parameters that I felt exceeded what was being taught out there, because most people were telling you how you ought to be instead of how you are. And we needed to start from how you are instead of trying to impose social idealisms and then have incongruencies and cloudiness and inconsistencies in our expression of what we said is important. So I help people identify what their values are since I was really 23 years old is when I first started getting involved in that. So I'm 70 this year, in just a few months. So a hierarchy of your values dictates your perception, decisions, and actions, and dictates every advantage over disadvantage decision you make. So you really can't take away human values from any motivation, drive, or any actions that we take. Alfred Marshall, in his Principles of Economics, showed that nobody moves a muscle without a motive. And those motives are measurable economically. So we can quantify literally the movements that we take in life, including perceptions, which are, in a sense, sensory monitorings of the universe. All of these are based on our values. So our character, our habits, our behavior are all expressions of what we value. So I put focus on values since 1978 because of that. And I've been, I guess, Mr. Values guy. I was talking about values. Every talk I ever do, it's about values. And people say, I've heard that, values. Yes. But it sometimes doesn't really sink in until they really get, and like you said, go down the rabbit hole a bit and really grasp what it's referencing. What's interesting is when we live in alignment and congruently with what our highest value is, the thing we spontaneously are inspired to act upon, the blood glucose and oxygen goes up into the forebrain, activates the medial prefrontal cortex, sometimes called the executive functioning center. And this is where we have the most inspired vision. This is where we have the most strategic planning. This is where we have the most reason. This is where we have the most execution spontaneously of what it is that's most meaningful to us. Our teleological purpose is an expression of this highest value. And this is where we excel. So if we dedicate to what's highest in our value and delegate what's lower in our values, we catapult ourselves and build incremental momentum towards ever greater achievements and become unstoppable in the empowerment of our lives and the influence and exemplification of what it does to other people. So we really maximize our potential when we live congruently with what we really, truly value and honor it instead of subordinate to outer authorities and cloud the clarity of what this is and fit in instead of stand out and live by duty instead of internal design.
Happy belated, or happy early birthday, I should say, more accurately. I feel like, I mean, I'll just say this. The first time I heard you talk about values and give the example of wealth building, I really started to internalize and look at my own life about whether I truly assessed wealth building as an actual value. I'm sure you get that a lot as the most common one because it's probably where you see the least amount of congruency between people's actions and actual, like, you know, what they say and what they do. And for me, that was one of the most eye-opening experiences because, I mean, extreme ownership, right? You have to stay accountable and understand about yourself. Like, I do not do the thing that I say I want to do. I do it with my fitness, I do it with my family, but like here with my finances, I'm spending more than I'm making, or I'm not tracking effectively. I don't understand how much I need to put away today to have more in 5, 10, 15 years from now. And that hypocrisy within my own actions forced me to start taking it more seriously and buy the right books and watch the right YouTube and consume the right podcasts to help me make more informed financial decisions, if you will. I've heard you talk about how you've read like over 1,000. I think it was 30,000 maybe, but I could be wrong about that. Please fact check me on that. But thousands of books.
It's nearly 31,000 texts now. And if I put in all the magazine articles, I have no idea. That's just massive. But I read a lot every day.
And I know that you internalize and I have this photographic memory that was non-existent, and then you effectively spoke it into existence. I have a silly question and an actual. I like to read a lot, but not that much, I can't say. And I'd like to know, how do you internalize that information? And have you ever reread anything?
The Great Books of the Western World by Britannica, the Great Ideas series, has 2 initial volumes. One is called Syntopic in volumes 1 and 2. And that text, which I consider one of the nicer texts produced, I have gone through multiple times. Most books I read once and I get and extract pretty thoroughly what I want out of it. Now, of course, if you come back 10 years from now, you might be in a different state. You might see completely different things in the book. But I just move on. I just keep moving on. Rarely do I read books over and over again. But the Syntopic in volumes 1 and 2 I have, because that's a really, really masterful set of books. And I've gone through them. And that's a synthesis and condensation, a synthesis topical condensation of the greatest minds of the Western world over the last 2,700 years condensed. So it's the people that have considered the people that have made the biggest mark in the world. Many of them are polymaths. So yeah, that one I've gone over multiple times. Most of the time I read a book, I get what I want, I move on, and I devour it. In fact, I used to sit in libraries or sit in bookstores and devour books. And sometimes they would ask me not to damage it if I'm just going to read it and not buy it sometimes. Because I would devour the book, and because it was easier for me to read it there quickly than it was to buy them and store them. But even though I used to buy 40 to 70 books a week on a typical week, I would many times just sit and read some of them in the place I was doing it to determine whether I wanted that book. Those 2 I've gone over because I believe that's a PhD on life, those 2 books. I think they're a great thing. Everybody could benefit from those 2 books. It's by Mortimer Adler, for those of you looking for the author.
So when you go about reading that many books, I guess I'm kind of curious your take on the statement of it's better to read 100 books 10 times through than to read 1,000 books or 10,000 books. How does that resonate with you?
Well, it depends on the book. If it's very condensed and you feel you could go through and extract more as you kept going through it. I have a pretty good vocabulary, so I pretty well get the books many times, unless they're really something novel in fields that I'm not as familiar with. It depends on the objective of the books, objective what you're doing, and what you're looking for, really, that whether those are, I think both strategies have a place. When I first started studying finance, for instance, in economics, I was 27. Before that, I read a few light little kind of esoteric books on prosperity and this kind of thing, nothing grounded. And I really got grounded at age 27 when I got confronted by questions that would discern whether I would be financially independent or not. Then I went and devoured the books. I went to the bookstore. In those days, there were Dalton's and Walden's bookstores. They were a chain. Before Borders and Barnes and Noble and before Amazon, that was what you had. And local bookstores. And I went to the bookstores. There were 2 of them, the Waldens and Daltons. And I read pretty well every book that was in the financial section, slowly but surely. But I'd have to say that 90% of them were not investment books. They claimed to be, but they were speculative books on how to speculate and time the market and try to get rich quick. And it was popular commercial books, but not with substance. And I later discerned over time, after reading about 1,400 plus books on economics and finance, probably less than 10% of them were really quality books. The rest of them are just get rich quick things. And I'm very conservative, very methodical. In order to become multiply financially independent, it wasn't because of fantasies. It wasn't because of gambling. It was because of just methodical mathematics and probabilities and investments. Quality companies, buying quality companies consistently for 42 years now. I discarded a lot. Paul Dirac, the Nobel Prize winner, in his Principles of Economics in 1947 said that it's not that we don't know so much. We know so much that is so. We've been indoctrinated by so much misinformation that's actually filtering out and discerning real quality information is the key. So I try to go through and try to read quality information, but I had to go through a lot of books to get to it and to discern what was really a meaningful book. For instance, Charles Ellis, who is a statistician, was referred to in a book called Investment Legends. There were 20 investment legends all the way through the 20th century, and 11 of them referred to him. So I said, okay, 11 of those guys are referring to him. I want to study him. So I studied all his books, Winning the Loser's Game and other books. And I saw that here's a gentleman now that is not commercially motivated as much as is factually motivated. He worked with John Bogle when he founded Vanguard Group, and he was dedicated to trying to help the people get wealthy, not Wall Street. And so studying those guys and learning about the mathematics and probabilities of these things and the gimmicks that were being played in the financial markets really helped me expedite the wealth building process. But I had to discard about 9 out of 10 books to finally get down to some quality pieces of literature. So as I read, I try to go to the people who originate the ology. So if I want to study magnetism, for instance, which is the foundation later for electromagnetism, I'm going to go to Gilbert. I'm going to go to the guy who originated the construct, because these are the most likely polymathic, dedicated individuals who have really discerned the previous literature to get and originate original ideas. I had a dream when I was 18 to create original ideas that served humanity. And so reading the people, the polymathic individuals that had contributed to new disciplines and new ologies, who had the courage to step out and not fit in, I wanted to stand on their shoulders and filter through the other stuff and get to really the core thinkers and try to find that. And that has saved me a lot of enormous times going and reading things that were more superfluous and usually commercially intended instead of actually factually and informationally intended.
There's so much that's going through my mind right now, thinking about all the books that I've read that have that commercial intention versus actual substantive, credible literature. I don't find it necessarily in this moment that I've wasted time doing that because it's helped prime me for interviews or for whatever, but you definitely just gave me a lot to think about right now. One of the other things that you said that resonates is all the guys in the other books are talking about this guy. And I felt the same way about some of the authors that I've read referring to the Stoics and how they constantly go back to, Marcus Aurelius, Aristotle. So like I picked up Meditations. I was like, what's this guy saying? I definitely want to know that. So that definitely resonated right now. I think one other thing that I love about what you do is focus. And I'm someone who's been pulled in tons of different directions throughout his life and even now. And I know that singular focus, precision, is extremely important in any endeavor. And if you're pulled in too many directions, you kind of lose that focus. When it comes to knowing where to put that focus, when it comes to knowing how to direct that energy, right? Because ambition without direction, you'll kind of just grow restless, grow tired, and eventually just burn out. When it comes to learning how to focus and putting the energy in the right places, when you feel like you're pulled in all these different directions, how do you know where to point yourself?
Like I said, every human being has a hierarchy of values, a set of priorities that they're living their life by that are authentic. It's actually what their life is being demonstrating. So one start is to go and do the value determination process that I worked on for all these years. It's free. It's online. You go to my website, drdemartini.com. It's free thing to do. But going through that, and being honest with yourself, and maybe do it again a week later and maybe a month later, and to look really honestly, because we want to write down what we want it to be instead of answer the questions as they're being asked, and look at what our life demonstrates spontaneously. So if I asked you, what do you do spontaneously every day that nobody has to remind you to do, that you just do, that you love to do? Most likely learning and interacting and sharing information is probably going to be in there somewhere. You may have also family and fitness, probably. If you look at what your life demonstrates, your life is demonstrating it. The only time we have conflict is when we're comparing ourselves to other people instead of comparing our daily actions to our own values. And then we cloud the clarity of what that is. Anytime we're acting on it, a confirmation is a tear of gratitude for the opportunity to do it and the results of it. So I get tears of gratitude pretty well every day, getting to do what I love doing research, discovering new things, and getting the opportunity to share with it and share it on podcasts. That's what inspires me. So finding out that which consistently inspires you is key. And dedicating to that and structuring your life through delegation so you're not having to do anything that you require extrinsic motivation to do, that you can hire somebody who can do those things to liberate yourself from the bondage and baggage and weight of the uninspirings. I learned many years ago what that was. One way to help a person do it, there's a number of ways, but one of them I learned from Mary Kay Cosmetic Company. I was speaking at the Anatole in Dallas to about 4,500 women about 40 years ago. I had the opportunity to meet with her after my speech. I asked her, what advice could you give a young, aspiring individual that wants to travel the world and teach and inspire people? And she said, every day, write down the highest priority actions you can do that day, 6 or 7 of them, and only actions that are done that day, not projects or goals that are longer than that day, just actions that day you can do. And then these are only actions you're committed to doing that day, and you commit to it. And I did that, and I kept them on index cards, and I carried them in my pocket. And then I knocked them out. Sometimes I'd add another one at the end of the day because I had time, or maybe 2 more. But I kept the cards, and I looked at what was the highest priority of the highest priority of the highest priority over time that I accumulated, that I kept writing, that were the highest priorities that I could meditate and think about in a state of gratitude when I wrote the priorities: teach, research, write, travel. That's what kept showing up for me. Now, when I looked at what I was most inspired to do, it was the same thing. It was just obvious. Then I did an exercise out of the book called The Time Trap many years ago. I made a list of every single thing that I did in a day over a 3-month period. Every single thing that I did, not broad, vague generalities like marketing, sales, this and that, but the actual action steps that I was doing throughout the day, moment by moment. What were the actions? And once I got that list there, and it was about 4 pages of list, I then over to the right of it, in a second column of 6 columns, I wrote in, how much does that produce per hour? How much money is that generating doing that action? Because if I'm not doing something that serves anybody, there's no income. My job is to do a service that also serves other people and meets their need enough where they're willing to have sustainable, fair exchange and remuneration. So I wrote down what it was, and I found out that there were some things that were not what I was expecting, that were higher producers than others. And then there were some things that I was doing that was get 0. So every time I was doing something that's a 0, I was devaluing my time and diluting my potential. So I made this list and I prioritized that list. Then I went into the third column and I went in there, how much meaning does it have? Because if I'm doing something that serves, that's serving them. But if it's not serving me, I'm going to be bored or burned out doing it. So what's that same list, what's the prioritization of meaning on it on a 1 to 10 scale? Now, when I got through that and reprioritized that list, there were some that was most producing that was also the most meaningful. And I realized there it was again: teach, research, write, travel. They showed up again. Then I looked at what was the cost of delegating those things. And every cost, not just the salaries, but every cost, space, technology, anything that was needed. And what's the spreads between what they can produce versus what it can cost. And I prioritize it by spreads. And then I wrote down how much time for each of these activities per day average. And then I final prioritize it in a 6 column. And then I start delegating everything below so I could be free to do what I'm absolutely inspired to do, so I could tap dance to work, as Buffett said. Well, it took me 18 months to get rid of everything except the top 3 things. That was basically what I wanted to do. And I have never done those things since. They've been delegated to other specialists. Now, the key is to find somebody who has highest on their value that job, because otherwise you're going to micromanage them and you're going to be distracted. So that took a few people to get to that person and build a team. As Jim Collins said, you put the right people on the bus, you build a team. But I eventually built the team, so I didn't have anything to do except teach, research, write, travel. Today, I teach, research, write, travel. I haven't driven a car since 1990. I haven't cooked since I was 24. I have cleaners. I have clock changers. I have a captain for my ship. I've got a pilot. I've got every specialist, drivers, concierge, everything else I delegate to other specialists who love doing that, who are excellent at what they do, that are greater than I am at it, so I can be free to teach, research, write, and travel. So I can't wait to get up in the morning and be of service, and people can't wait to get the service because of it. And that liberates, and people say, well, that's nice because you're financially independent, you can afford that. I said, no, I became financially independent because I did it.
I've heard you talk about it like that before, but I never heard the punchline like that before. That was definitely, I think,
Yeah, I didn't become wealthy and then did it. I became wealthy because I did it. That's the twist that people got to get. But many people are afraid to delegate because they hire people that aren't inspired, and they have to micromanage and push around, and they don't produce. And that will cost you. But it won't cost you if you get somebody who's more competent than you, that you can liberate yourself from it and they can do it. Not abnegate it, but just liberate it. Yeah, I teach, research, write, travel today.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Inside the Inspired. My name is Jonathan Cohen, and I have a quick favor to ask you. If you're getting any value out of this content, please take a second to subscribe to the channel. You help us reach more people, and you can also stay up to date with all the latest content coming your way. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll catch you in the episode. I'm thinking about the practice of understanding your values relative to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And a lot of what I understand you to talk about is about the top of the pyramid of Maslow, which is fulfillment. I'm curious from your perspective, and I'm going to do my best to ask this question in the way that I intend. When we look at Maslow's, we see that love from others relative to self-esteem and fulfillment, like fulfillment's at the top, but love from others comes before self-esteem. I'm curious what your take is on that, because it kind of confuses me a bit, right? Because we should have our own fulfillment. I understand the baseline, that is, basic physiological needs, what we need to eat, sleep, breathe, and then to feel safe. But in terms of like needing love from other people, finding fulfillment, knowing our values is part of fulfillment, it all kind of bewilders me a bit, because I feel like once we know our values, like we're set. But that's at the top of the pyramid, which also says that we need love from other people, right? So how does all that make sense in your mind, if you will?
The basic essentials, and I've had the opportunity to see people at all scales, from extreme poverty in South America, Central America, Africa, India, some of the Asian groups. I've seen extreme poverty, phenomenal poverty, Mumbai slums and things. I've also seen extreme wealth. And I've met over 100 and something billionaires. So I've seen both poles. There's definitely a difference in hierarchy of values. There's no question in my mind that if I did the hierarchy of values of each of those individuals, you can see that there's a difference. In Maslow's basic needs, you've got oxygen first, then water, then food, then reproduction and shelter. Those are basics. Some people don't have that. They have poor water, poor oxygen, poor air. Some places in India, in New Delhi, for instance, it's so polluted you can't see 70 feet. The point is that that's the basic needs. Now, somebody that does not have the to get capacity of go beyond that, that's the basic survival modality. And there are people there. And I know what that's like. I lived that way as a kid. When they have that, they finally find a shelter. And they get something that they can own as a shelter. The second thing they want to do is secure that, not to lose that again. So security after survival is Maslow's idea. Security. I want to secure those survival essentials. I want to secure those. So they go to a point where they're now securing those in their livelihood. So make sure that they store the water, they get enough to keep it alive. They want to get to a point where they've got security. Because some people are nomadic, don't have anything, and they don't know where their next meal's coming from or where they're going to get water next time. And I've seen that in townships of Africa. They don't even know if they can have water for that day. Once they have security, they want to there's a natural tendency of the amygdala. The amygdala, the subcortical nuclei, the amygdala, is involved in assigning valency to events and make us seek prey and avoid predator. And that's survival. So we're afraid of losing prey, security, and afraid of being trapped by the tiger, the predator. And so we want to secure our boundaries to not get eaten and to not lose food. So that's that security state. And that's an amygdala response, a survival response, an animal survival response. But once we get those, and we've got a security, we've got a boundary, we've got a little place we call our own, we've got food stored there, we protect ourselves from the elements and from people attacking us or stealing from us. We then go to self-esteem. Self-esteem is an amygdala's next step where we want to have pride and we want to start to imagine ourselves with a greater life. And we want to kind of show off what we have, and we start a pecking order game. There's many people, you've seen people that want to be wealthy and they dress and they play the part that want to be wealthy versus the people that are wealthy that are very simple. So they're still in the self-esteem stage. I want to stand out. You see a lot on the social media and everything else that they want to be. This self-esteem stage is I want to go up the pecking order and rise up and demonstrate beyond security. I want to show that I'm beyond security and kind of show off a bit. This is where many people are confusing love, which really means infatuation, admiration. They want somebody to look at them and admire them and look up to them and think they've arrived to a point where they're now secure. That's not real deep love. That's not agape love. That's an infatuation and the fear of rejection. That's really another way of saying it. The fear of rejection and fear of not fitting in. Thousands of years ago, before we started becoming planting cultures, we were nomadic and we lived more in small groups. And when we started to use agriculture, we started to get in larger groups and people started doing specialties and a division of labor and a class system started to emerge. When that occurred, we then had a fear of banishment, a fear of rejection, because if we didn't know how to do everything, we were no longer generalists. We had to rely on other people. So this is the self-esteem stage. We got to, stand out amongst the group and position ourselves, etc. Now comes the self-actualization stage. And here we go, or the social stage. The social stage is where we want to fit in, and we're afraid of losing our identity and losing the security of all the people. We have this autonomous, we have the courage to stand out, to be the leader, to originally think, to be ridiculed, and it's okay, as long as we feel that it's an objective system. Kohlberg says we go from by pain and pleasure as a drive to eventually the moral injected values of other people from authorities to eventually transcend it where we start to live by the universal laws, the laws that are not violatable by any human being. So we go from violatable laws to unviolatable laws as we mature. The self-actualized individual is the one that's willing to go on beyond that and live an autonomous individual. This is what the Stoics were trying to say. Not live for immediate gratification, not hedonism, but eudaimonia, which is meaningful. The thing that distinguishes us from the animals is meaning, not just hedonism and pleasure. So we have survival, we have, security, we have the socialization where we got to fit in and not be abandoned. We got the self-esteem and the pecking order from that. And then we finally have a self-actualization. We realize we've got everything. We don't need anything. We don't need their opinions, etc. But we now have a philanthropic thing. What can we do to make a contribution to the world and to society? That's the self-actualized. And when people live according to their highest values, they move towards self-actualization. But if they've injected the values of others and they try to live in other people's values and they cloud the clarity of what's most important to them, they're going to be in one of Maslow's needs. They're going to be at one of those lower levels automatically. And so having the courage to be yourself in a world that wants you to be different than yourself, to fit in instead of stand out. If you ask people, no matter who they are, if you want to make a difference in the world, they all want to say, yes, I want to make a difference. You can't do that fitting in. You do that standing out. You do that with original ideas that serve human beings, that meets their needs, that actually inspire you to deliver. And that's Ernest Becker, in his Denial of Death, has a beautiful video online called Conformity. If they haven't seen that, it's worthy watching. And he talks about two hero pathways, the collective heroism and individual heroism. The collectivism is to basically be acknowledged by the group and fit in and be living in a facade, a mask, a persona that you wear for the society as a mask. And the other is the individual that stands autonomous as an independent individual thinker, unborrowed by vision, and focuses on something that contributes. And without those people, we stagnate. We have to have original thinkers to create new and innovative things, kind of like the misfits of Steve Jobs or the Elon Musk. If they don't, we stagnate. What Elon Musk has done, for instance, compared to what NASA has done, he's catapulted everything forward. And if without those misfits, we stagnate. And so somebody has to have the courage to be a self-actualizing individual and giving themselves permission to do something extraordinary and different in order to make the evolutionary process catapulted forward.
I feel like I could sit here and ask you questions all day, just like listening to you speak and the depth of the response. There's so much to take away that I feel like the audience is going to have to, I know I will, have to go back and revisit this particular answer because it helps us understand ourselves. And so I guess kind of getting to the crux of the question I think I asked is that values within Maslow are at that pinnacle, right? Where self-actualization is. Once you've kind of, maybe you
No,
could...
the values are at all levels.
Okay.
Yeah. So in the hierarchy of values, as you go up the hierarchy of values, let's say you do a value determination process on my website, and you get 3 to 5 values listed after you've done this exercise. It's 13 questions. That will give you your top values because that's the one that moves you in self-actualized direction. But if you were to answer 4 answers or 5 answers instead of 3 answers on it, you'd get a longer list of values. You might get 10. If you did, you would then look at the hierarchy from the highest down to lower, not lowest, but lower, because there's no lowest, it's just lower. Anytime you're living by the highest values, you move up Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Guarantee it. I've been doing this for 46 years. Anytime you go and try to do lower priority things, you move down Maslow's needs. Guarantee that too. So when I see people struggling and living in desperation, they're living by deontological duty instead of ontological design. The study of ontology is the study of becoming and being. And people at the bottom of the values are becoming. The people at the top are living according to who they are. They're authentic, they're integral, and they're living congruently. and they're self-actualizing and they're inspired and they can't wait to get up in the morning and be who they are. I was asked by Vogue magazine one time in an interview. They asked me 17 questions, this 1-hour interview. They said, Dr. Demartini, the final question, it said, Dr. Demartini, if there's anybody on the planet you could be, who would you love to be? And I looked at him and I thought, what a weird question. I have no desire to be anybody but Dr. Demartini. Why would I want to be somebody? Why would I want to be second at being somebody else when I could be first at being me? It doesn't make any sense. Why would I want to live in the shadows of anyone when I can stand on the shoulders of everyone? So I basically did that. And they were kind of like, oh, well, everybody usually has something they wish they could be. And I said, well, envy is ignorance and imitation is suicide. I have no interest in envying other people because I know enough about people that I once thought they were amazing. I found out when I got to know them, they were just human beings like me. We're all just human beings with our own set of pains and pleasures and strengths and weaknesses and things of this nature. I just happen to have a little bit of strength in the area of human behavior. But I'm an idiot when it comes to IT, an idiot when it comes to cars and driving, an idiot when it comes to sports. The areas I don't know. I'm completely idiot. I have to hire people to take care of it for me. So, if I get a glitch in my computer, I call my IT guy and he comes in and takes care of it. We sometimes think that somebody else has got something we don't. At the level of the essence of what the theologians call the soul, nothing's missing in us. That was the Gnostic pleroma of fulfillment that we all have access to. But the level of the existence of our senses, things appear to be missing. And the things that appear to be missing in our life that leave us empty through judgment are all the things that we are too proud or too humble to admit that we see in other people that we don't honor in ourselves. Pure reflective awareness liberates us from those empty feelings, the voids that drive our values. But actually living according to our highest value, that's the key to fulfilling those values and living more objectively and more neutral with less judgment and more inspiration. And then we transcend that and we move right up Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So Maslow's needs, if we superimpose them on the hierarchy of values, the lower the values you're living in, the more you go towards the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy. You're living in survival because you're feeling that you're living by duty, not design. And at the top, you're living by design. You're self-actualizing.
It's such a powerful sentiment. Like when people talk about living by default and living by design, and then you go into the conceptual, theoretical aspect of it, Maslow compared to values. You kind of looked at it like values are the key, for lack of a better way of putting it, or like the scale by which you're measuring Maslow, and that they kind of go side by side to understand how to move up and down in terms of how to self-actualize. And that was very enlightening. I'm so excited to go back and redo your values assessment because I've done it before.
When I was in practice, I started my practice in 1982. Well, I was secretly practicing before that, but that's when I formally opened up my little shingle. I did everything when I started. You start a business, you do everything. You're a generalist. And I hired one person, and they took care of some of the administration and scheduling and things. But I was still doing all kinds of stuff. I was doing bank reconciliations and supplies and radiographic evaluation. I was doing all kinds of stuff. And there were hundreds of things that I was doing. And then I thought, I went to, nearly 10 years of college for this, for doing a supply and a bank reconciliation. And I could hire in those days, 1902, for $20, I could hire a bookkeeper. So I started to look at what I could generate doing public speaking and engaging new people into as patients, the actual clinical, care. And I could produce $1,500 to $15,000 an hour there, or $20 an hour. Why would I be doing a $20 an hour job and devaluing myself? Didn't make any sense. So once I started delegating, the things that weighed me down, that devalued my time, that left me struggling financially, that made me have to go and work and then worry about the bills and, oh my God, what about this cost? And all those distractions were because I was doing low priority things. So I was staying at the bottom of the barrel in security. I wasn't in survival, but I was in security and going back and forth between survival and security when I was 27. And I was sitting there going, it'll burn you out doing this every day. I read the book, The Time Trap by Ella McKenzie. I learned to delegate. I gradually liberated myself from that. And I got into the things that I can't wait to do in the morning. And that is to go and share with people and actually do my clinical applications. When I got to do that, I felt more professional. I made way more income. My income went tenfold net. And I ended up with 5 doctors and 12 staff members. And within 18 months, I went from myself in a little small office to a 5,000 square foot office with 5 doctors, 12 staff members, making tenfold more income, doing what I love to do, attracting my own television show, getting opportunities to speak, book deals. I mean, things started to, when you live authentically, doors of opportunity come in. Every symptom in your business, every symptom in your physiology, every symptom in your psychology, every symptom in your sociology are feedback mechanisms to kick your butt to get you to be authentic and to live by priority. Once you see that everything is on the way for that objective, you learn to delegate and to appreciate the steps of liberating yourself from that which is not you. It's like removing the parts that aren't the sculpture of David by Michelangelo.
Speaking of Michelangelo, one of my favorite quotes is that, and kind of in line with what you're saying and a lot of what I talk about on this podcast, I saw an angel in the marble, so I carved it out. And so a lot of what I believe in terms of becoming the ultimate version of yourself or just living in alignment and congruency, as you've put it, it comes down to slowly chipping away and becoming that version of ourselves that we ultimately want to. In the couple minutes that we have left, I have 1.5 more questions for you. What belief about what you've accomplished or you've studied through all these years, what belief, if any, are you currently unlearning? If there is one at all.
I don't know if I have something I'm so much unlearning right now. I'm filling in the gaps and refining the details and focusing on ever finer detail to the quantum level of you might say, the cosmological puzzle. It gets more detail as it goes along. I've been fascinated by, when I was 18 years old, I was given 2 giant 6x6 by 6 foot wooden crates of books by my uncle, who was a professor at MIT. Get this, flatbed truck came to this my parents' house, and I got a crowbar and I opened this thing up and just filled my room with books. And one of the books in there was by Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, or Leibniz, depending on how you pronounce it. And in there, on the very first chapter of this book, Discourse on Metaphysics, he said that no human being could out-perfect the perfection. There was a hidden order in the universe that few people ever got to see, but those that did, their lives changed forever. And when I read that, I got tears in my eyes. I couldn't explain it, but I know you know what I'm talking about. When you get a tear, you know there's something here that's a confirmation of direction and authenticity. And I document that. And that's been a guide for me through all these years. And so I said, I want to know what this thing he called the perfection is. Now, it wasn't an abstract, anthropomorphical, logical deity kind of idea. It was more of that there was a hidden order inside the chaos in life. Stephen Wolfram, the modern mathematician, says that the difference between entropy and negentropy, or disorder and order, is the computational boundary in which we filter our reality through. So if we basically were able to see what was actually there, we would see the hidden order. And Pascal addressed this. So I've been a believer since 18 that there was a hidden order in the apparent chaos, and I was going to find that and study that. And that led me to the study of thermodynamics and Clausius and Claude Shannon's work. And Claude Shannon said that information, when you have disorder, you have information missing, which Jung called the unconscious and Leibniz called the unconscious. Leibniz actually came up with the term unconscious. And the one I realized is that the quality of our life is based on the quality of the questions we ask. The quality of the questions we ask is what makes the unconscious conscious. And if we become fully aware simultaneously of what's conscious and unconscious simultaneously and become fully conscious and mindful, we can see the hidden order in the apparent chaos. And we have an awe, inspiration. When we live by our highest values and we're congruent, We have the greatest, most objective, most reasonable, most purely reflective state of awareness available. So we approximate the order to the degree that we live congruently. And I believe the reason why all the symptoms of life are trying to get us there is because the universe is sentient in that respect, trying to guide the life within the universe to move forward and to maximize its potential and actualize itself in the world. I was studying anything and everything I could study on the physics and the thermodynamics of disorder and order. I found Boltzmann said that the theories of thermodynamics are incomplete and they're only probabilistic and statistical. They're not what's actually there. And then Merpodius said that there's a law of least action, and that actually everything is actually most efficient. And when you don't see the efficiency, it's because you're not seeing all the information. And I've been developing a method called the Demartini method on helping people see the order inside their chaos, to help them realize that the things they're judging is only because of incomplete information. When they actually see all the information, they are just sitting in tears of gratitude for their own life and for what's happening in their life. And so that's been my pursuit, to try to help people see the hidden order in the apparent chaos and to ask new questions to become it, revealing it, and to move through the survival all the way to self-actualization. And that occurs by prioritization. And that's why values are the foundation for this whole thing.
And the better the question, the better the answer, as I like to say. And I definitely feel like you made me think I need to ask better questions. And this was honestly fantastic. I know you're busy. I want to be respectful of your time. I appreciate you joining us today on Inside the Inspired. Please let the audience know where they can keep up with your journey.
Well, if they want to find something about me, I'll just go to drdemartini.com. There they can go on the website, browse the website, go onto the media and look at thousands of interviews or podcasts or YouTubes or whatever. Look at the events to find out where I am, because I travel all the time. I've been living on a ship for 23 years, so I travel around the world and speak. I'm in Taiwan right now as we're speaking, about to sail to Manila. But if they go there, they can find out what I'm up to and go look and, I think if you look online, you'll find me.
Dr. Demartini, thank you so much. And until the next one.